You ever get the feeling that everything in America is completely fucked up? You know that feeling that the whole country is like 1 inch away from saying, that's it, forget it. Let's see,
They
we're
twist
on,
around. Now look, here's a
92
house full of
FM
bees.
tonight. It feels like
You think the
nice
honey
cool
badger
little
cares?
band
It doesn't
so
give a
far.
shit.
Listen, let's get one thing straight.
Price is right.
Guns don't kill people. I do.
I think some apologies are owed.
Damn, it's been a while since I have heard that. You know what's funny is when an album is, I always say, it's ingrained in your DNA. Like right 2 seconds in, I was like, I know that snare sound. I was trying to think. I was like going through like it's definitely from my childhood. I remember, and that's also that Operation Ivy. That's also known as the album with the worst guitar tone ever recorded.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, that song or that album, Jimmy turned me on to right when I had graduated high school, moved down to Santa Rosa to work in my cousin's restaurant. I was living with Jimmy, and I did not like punk music at all.
Really?
At the time, yeah, I'd never been exposed to it, and so when he turned me on to that, I was like, kind of like afraid of it. Like, this is so gnarly. It's so heavy, right? And now I look back on it and I'm like, it's kind of like cute.
Yeah, it's like super poppy and
yeah,
it's got like reggae songs and ska songs.
I know.
I remember I heard that in high school, I believe, and I loved it. I thought it was great. That grew on me big time. But I was never the. You have like Operation Ivy people that are just like sycophants, like that's like they're Led Zeppelin or whatever. So I never really took it that far. But that whole, they were major players. That whole like East Bay scene that brought like Green Day and Sam I Am and I guess Jawbreaker and 15 and
They eventually became Rancid, right?
Yeah, Rancid, yeah. Same. Little known fact, the guitar on that album, and I think the first couple of Rancid albums, is played by the bass player.
What do you think of the bass tone on that album?
It's much better than the guitar tone.
I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think it's cool.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for some of those old punk rock tones back then.
That wasn't the song I meant to play, by the way.
Oh, yeah, you're giving me like a confused look.
I was like, wait a second, this isn't what I was expecting. You know what's funny? I posted for our Patreon supporters. I posted the interview that we did last week with Ryan Houston.
Awesome.
On YouTube.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are supporting us on Patreon, go check it out. But in that episode, we did that Enya song.
I was just going to bring this up.
And so what's a great thing about Enya?
What?
One of the many great things about Enya. When you post things on YouTube, they do almost like a check. They check it for copyrighted material.
Yeah.
Right.
And then from there, they check it for COVID misinformation. And then
yes.
From there, they check it for domestic extremism.
And then if they get around to it, they check it for kiddie porn. But it's not really up on
not the priority.
Not on the top of their list. Well, so they flagged.
It's not like Twitter. No, wait, they don't check for that either.
No, that's right. Maybe they should have someone from the FBI work there, and then they'd be checking for it.
You're halfway there. They do have people from the FBI working there. They're just not checking for kiddie porn.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Darn. Well, maybe Elon Musk should tell them about the kiddie porn on there. Oh, wait a second. I'm reading. Oh, he did. Okay, and they still didn't do anything. Okay. Anyways, so I posted the video. They did the check, and they said there's copyrighted material on here. Even though I believe we're allowed to do what we do,
Right.
because we're doing it in a documentarian sort of way of analyzing the songs and whatnot.
Yeah.
But anyways, they flag it anyways.
Which is a beautiful loophole.
And the beautiful thing about Enya is that it says we found copyrighted material on your video, but the person who owns the copyright is okay with you using it on YouTube.
Hey, thanks, Enya.
I know.
Shout out.
Another great thing about Enya, there's no advertising on their videos.
Really?
Yeah.
Dang.
And I don't know if just because they're not that popular.
She's rolling that sail away
Or
money.
I guess so.
Just doesn't give a shit. It's funny that you brought that up because we were watching, if you're watching the video of this, we have that intro where we put together all these kind of clips. And there's some pretty dark / I wouldn't say macabre, but dark content in there. But it's just stuff from movies that we enjoy, or that we thought were important. And it had this when I was watching the Ryan Houston. So I kind of went out of town for the weekend, and you put together that video, and I watched it. And I was watching the intro, and to see that visual content with this beautiful Enya song is so perfect. And I remember, bottle of wine down at my parents' house, watching it, going like, I wonder if we could buy the rights to this and just keep it, like make it our everyday intro. Because remember we talked about the juxtaposition of doing MMA, and we're always listening to like just like gay ass techno music, or like weird dance
school like lowrider
right?
oldies.
Yeah, and then we went into the gym and they were listening to Pantera one time. I was like, this is a little too much. Just like we're not lacking in aggression here.
Yeah,
I think that goes for our intro too.
Yeah,
so to hear like a punk song, I was like, yeah, that's cool. I was like, but man, the weird flowing juxtaposition of having Enya, and then watching footage from Red Dawn, and it made me think while we were watching that, I was like, you know what? That's when I was a little kid. That's what made that movie A Clockwork Orange resonate so much for me, because it's just like we're talking about the ultra violence and it's all this like disturbing, like dystopian kind of landscape stuff,
juxtaposed with Beethoven.
With having like some of the most beautiful classical music throughout the movie.
Totally. Well, wait till you hear the song that I meant to play next time. All right. So
I've been out of the loop. So you're gonna bring me up to speed on what's going on in the world.
I'll do my best.
Off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Accuracy is not one of our hallmarks, so don't be stressed about this.
Nor timeliness.
Yeah.
So I want to show a video.
I heard JFK got shot.
Yeah. We landed on the moon.
Allegedly.
I came across this video of Rishi Sunak before he was Prime Minister of
the UK.
England.
Right.
Yeah, the UK. And it was him at the...
And he was a World Economic Forum global leader, wasn't he? Along with Justin Trudeau and Gavin Newsom. And
isn't everybody?
That's a good point.
I mean, Tulsi Gabbard.
Gabbard.
Just
Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
there's like gray areas in there. I've heard these things be refuted, but there's definitely some kind of affiliation from almost anyone in politics, which I'm sure is just a complete coincidence. But
of course.
But you have people that are out and proud, like World Economic Forum people that are do not hide the fact that they are carrying water. And the most glaring example of that would be Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. I've also heard that you can get named a young global leader without
which I think is
being
what,
at all involved.
Right, which is what I think the defense of like Dan Crenshaw and Tulsi Gabbard was. They named that. I didn't apply for that or anything.
Who do you think's better, Dan Crenshaw or Tulsi Gabbard?
Tulsi Gabbard, because my thing is anti-war, and so was she.
Yeah.
As someone who was a combat vet and came back and said like we need to be out of these countries. As far as
I feel like Crenshaw is bad on a lot of things.
I liked his act at first. I'm a lot more, I guess, sympathetic to hear someone's views on foreign policy if they were an active combat vet, and he very much was. I mean, lost his eye in an IED attack. I thought he did a good job when he kind of came out. He would post these videos. I mean, I am reticent to apply any empathy towards any politician. So there's my bias. He did a good job actually of going through, getting caught up in like the celebrity of politics and the gossip, and like now these Twitter gotcha moments, and everyone's trying to get like FaceTime because they don't give a shit about legislation or policy. They give shit about power, growing their power. Getting a host spot on Fox News or MSNBC, after their term is up or whatever. But I thought Dan Crenshaw did a good job that he'd post these videos going through the specifics and the nuances of bills, which I know is not, I mean, today's pop culture is, no one wants to pay attention to that, but I'm fascinated by it.
Well, when you consider how few bills get read that go through
by the
Congress,
people
that's actually kind of like a radical move on his
right,
part.
Yeah. That's what I thought. I was like, okay, kudos for reading the bill, thank you.
Yeah.
And he's go through, it's like, here's exactly what the bill says, and he'd even present both sides. Like, here's the opposition to it, here's the pro for it, and so, yeah, he just, but at the end of the day, they're all politicians. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, exactly.
I'd say he's
like we've talked about before. It's just a bad word.
Yeah.
All right. So, anyways, Rishi Sunak back in 2021 was part of the COP26 climate summit, which is the 26th UN summit on climate change. I think COP stands for Convention on People. I don't know. It's funny. I have it up in front of my computer right now, and I don't see what COP actually stands for.
Good delivery, though.
Yeah, it was held in Glasgow, like I said, in 2021. Anyways, I wanted to play this video because, in hindsight, you really can just see like the evil that is behind all of this climate change stuff. Not just the climate change stuff, but the World Economic Forum and people like this guy that are just so clearly like bred and groomed and tailor-made.
That's what I was
take over the world government, take over a country's government, usher that into world government, and then slowly just take away everything from all of us.
You'll get nothing and like it.
And end up with that.
That's from their website.
So, all right. Get a load of this guy.
The first COP to bring together so many of the world's finance ministers, businesses, and investors with such a clear common purpose: to deliver the promise made in Paris 6 years ago to direct the world's wealth to protect our planet. The good news is that the will is there. At least 80% of the global economy has committed to net zero or carbon neutrality targets.
There's that net zero again.
Yep. Now,
that's a callback to we called the horse and buggy a net zero vehicle, and turns out, doing a little research, we were wrong. Other than that, sorry for the crass humor.
I thought I had a sound for the. Never mind. Okay, sorry. We'll take that out in post. So he just said 80% of the world's economy has committed to net zero. Now, I heard that and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So what he doesn't mean 80% of the people that make up the world's economy, 80% of the business owners.
Right.
He means the 80% of the money that's in the economy.
Yeah.
Which is controlled by...
like 7 people.
Yeah, exactly. So the 7 of us have agreed...
So myself, BlackRock, Vanguard, and Bill Gates have come to a conclusion.
And he came from Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, he is isn't he the wealthiest person in the UK, something like that? I think he's one of the wealthiest people in that entire area.
It was just so strange how he came to power too. Like they got rid of Bojo, and then they put in that chick that was supposed to be kind of conservative,
right?
And she lasted like 17 or 18 minutes, something I think, and then he was installed.
I heard an amazing conspiracy theory that I can't just tell you right now, I got to think about it. But they're like, well, here's why she was only in power for like half a day or something like that. God dang it. I got to, okay, it'll come to me later.
Yeah, okay. So anyways, I just thought that was kind of worth pointing out. Like, hold on a second, 80%? Because the people that own small businesses, small farmers of the world, people that drive a truck, like, we're not interested in net zero.
No.
Fuck off with
And
that.
also, net zero is not a thing.
Exactly. And when you hear net zero, what you should really hear is...
You'll get nothing, and like it.
Okay, that's what the zero is in net zero. It means you will get nothing.
It's either that or...
How dare you?
Yeah. I'm just so sick of all these warmongering pedophiles myself.
Dude.
Yeah.
You know what? Smarter men than us have definitely...
Have said it better?
Yeah, for sure, man.
I am so sick of these warmongering pedophiles!
Oh, we're getting new toys. We have a budget now. Thanks, Patreon.
Dude, I forgot to tell you. So I haven't been drinking.
Really?
This month.
Except for right now.
No, I'm drinking
Oh, dang.
kombucha.
Nice.
Dude, I've been on the wagon for the whole month.
It's kombucha, Clem.
I'm calling it Parched March.
Oh, nice.
Nice ring to it, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't do a month of not drinking unless it's like sober October. Like the month has to have.
Right.
So I was thinking about it yesterday. I was like, what if I get through March and I'm liking not drinking, and then I want to go to April? It's like, well, I got to come up with a name for April too then. I think I got a good one.
Okay.
I'm going to call it April.
Wow. Dang. Not bad.
Pretty good, huh?
Jeez.
Okay, back to the show.
We'll take that out too in post.
Our challenge now is to deploy the investment we need to deliver those targets around the world. To do so, we are accelerating 3 actions today.
By the way, if you listen to this guy talk and you start to hear the Darth Vader theme music come in, we didn't add that, okay? That's your brain filling in the gaps. I think that this guy is truly evil.
Yeah.
Even if he's not, what he's talking about, obviously, clearly, is evil. He's talking about taking away the one thing that has led to the most peace and prosperity in the world, that has lifted more people out of poverty than anything else. And that is namely, well, 2 things.
Kombucha.
Thank you. Root beer, oil, and the free market, which are the 2 enemies of a guy like this who wants to consolidate power into the 7 wealthiest people in the world to tell everyone else what to do. That is not a free market.
Yeah.
And
Which is the overarching theme of the World Economic Forum.
Correct.
Is what I think is the thing that, and well, it's all related, the COVID fuckery, the climate change, but we hit that more than anything else on this podcast. It's getting people to recognize that these global elites, like this guy, is the epitome. The Justin Trudeau's, the Klaus Schwab's, the Yuval Harari's, and they talk about all these things. They talk about net zero. They talk about getting you out of your cars, the elimination of fossil fuels, and the most constant reminder that we have is telling people, like, they're not talking about them. They're talking about you guys, everyone else, the rest of you plebes, the 98% or whatever. Like, you guys will own nothing and like it.
Right.
First, we need increased public investment. And I want to speak directly to the developing countries of the world.
Which means increased taxes and or printing of money.
Which has the same net result.
Exactly. Which basically is you're paying for this.
Which is net zero for you.
You're paying for your own destruction. You're paying for this destruction of your society. You're paying for your own impoverishment.
Right.
We know that you've been devastated by the double tragedies of coronavirus and climate change.
Stop. Nope. No.
Devastated by coronavirus. Wow, he must be talking about all of the millions of totally healthy people that were just completely wiped out by coronavirus.
Something we keep bringing up. When someone says that, say, stop. Like, we have an entire generation of kids that were just ruined by coronavirus. No, we were not. Coronavirus doesn't affect kids.
Mm-hmm.
Government reaction to coronavirus ruined a generation of kids.
Yeah, shutting down schools, masking
Ruined kids.
everyone,
Yes.
closing businesses. That's fucking up the supply chains that hurt people around the world. That was all due to government actions.
A virus does not stop a supply chain.
Correct.
I'd love to hear the argument against that. It's the bureaucratic reaction to whatever said crisis is, which is completely fabricated in the end anyway, that we're finding out.
And he said two things there: the dual tragedies of coronavirus and climate change.
I made a quick half-second bet. I was like, he's going to drop a Putin in there. So I was like, it's either going to be climate change, coronavirus, or Putin.
This was 2021, so
okay.
Yeah, not
me.
quite as hot back then.
All right.
So yeah, and I don't know how these developing countries are suffering from climate change. Explain that to me.
Yeah.
Everyone in the world is healthier than they were 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Everyone's living longer. The planet is actually 15% greener, and mostly in places where it was desert.
Yes.
And everybody's getting rich. I mean, free energy means cheaper stuff, and everyone gets rich together. That is literally happening. And it's so great because it just shows the difference between people from our way of thinking and people from a straight up regime Democrat or Republican way of thinking, where we need to help people so that they can we can lift them up out of poverty by giving them stuff and then making them dependent on the government. We need to have government services. It's like, no, that's not what you do. You help those people by making them rich. We don't want to really help people by giving them stuff. We want them to get rich. We want poor people to do something miraculous and get fucking filthy, stinking rich. That's how we want the world to get better. And guess what? That has been happening over the last century or more, thanks to oil and the free market. I mean, boil it down to two basic
when
things.
I hear people like this speak, and this kind of dovetails on what you were just saying, if someone were to say, what's your elevator pitch? Like, I don't have time to talk about the World Economic Forum and the World Bank and the IMF and the Federal Reserve and the creation of the central banking system. You're like, right, just give it to me quick. I'm like, there is an active cabal of like the most powerful people in the world trying to destroy the American way of life. Why? I was like, because the American way of life has created more wealth and more lifting of people out of poverty and misery than any other system, any other country in the history of the world. Why would someone want to destroy that? I was like, because when you create prosperity, in turn, prosperity creates self-sufficiency. And people that are self-sufficient cannot be subjugated and controlled.
Right.
So that's why they want to completely
because they don't need anything. They don't
destroy the system we're at now, get people in such a miserable level in their little tiny, you can only take public transportation, no more private property, you're going to get your government food, you're not allowed to have meat, you're going to have your bug burger and everything, and you have nothing. So it's like, I can't, like, my life is so miserable in a day-to-day existence, and they try to sell it to you that you're going to love this, which is the most fucking demented sales pitch I've ever heard. And so you'll be willing to accept it. So take it as like a microcosm, right, of that same system would be the COVID thing. We're gonna shut down all the businesses. We're gonna take your kids out of school. You can't go to work, and you're just like I can't remember. There's a name for this. It's not the Mott and Bailey, but it's something else. It's problem solution reaction. It's we're gonna create the problem. You will be in such a state of misery, or like, give us some answers, and then we will give you the answers. We've already predetermined the answers before we created the problem, by the way.
Yep.
So, yeah, this guy is the epitome of that.
Yep.
That's the elevator pitch for the entire World Economic Forum. So I was like, what is it that they really are trying to do? I was like, that would be what I would say. Ding. Have a good day.
That's why the G20 is stepping up to provide debt treatments more swiftly. It's why the IMF are providing a new $650 billion allocation of special drawing rights, and Kristalina will say more on this later. And it's why we're going to meet the target to provide $100 billion of climate finance to developing countries. And while we know we are not yet meeting it soon enough, we will work closely with developing countries to do more and to reach the target sooner. Over the next 5 years, we will deliver a total of $500 billion of investment to the countries that need it most. And we can do more today. I can announce that the United Kingdom will commit £100 million to the Task Force on Access to Climate Finance, making it quicker and easier for developing countries to access the finance they need. And we're supporting a new capital markets mechanism, which will issue billions of new green bonds here in the UK to fund renewable energy in developing countries. 2 tangible, practical examples of how we're delivering our promise of $100 billion.
So you might not want it, but you're getting it.
The old IMF. The old IMF and the World Bank. Have you looked a lot into like what the mechanism by which the World Bank operates?
Yes.
Which is synonymous with the U.S., more or less.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard a great metaphor for it.
Okay.
From someone involved in the real estate industry. It's like, you remember the 2008 crash, right?
Oh, yeah.
And everyone was given these adjustable rate mortgages. It's like, hey, a guy that obviously can't afford this $400,000 house, we're going to give you they even had what they called ninja loans, no income, no job applications.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so people,
Also known as the fog the mirror test. They would hold a mirror under your nose. Yeah. If you fogged the mirror, you'd get the loan.
Here's your keys. And he explained it like this, like, well, the bank was knowingly selling these loans that they knew that people couldn't afford to keep. Particularly when you get into the mortgage-backed securities and
it was stated income. Can you believe that shit? I actually got one of those loans. No. That was a term that they used in the industry. Stated income.
I remember at that time, everyone I knew bought a house, and my girlfriend at the time said, like, we got to buy a house. I'm like, no. She goes, why not? I was like, I don't have any money. I'm not going to buy a house. So the bank was, basically, I think most people know, like, basically how that model worked. But the interesting question is, when we talk about things like the IMF and the World Bank, is why would the bank knowingly basically underwrite millions of loans that they knew they were going to fail? This guy explained it like this. He goes, because money is more or less arbitrary. We just print, it's made up. The value of it is made up at this point. And we're not giving anyone any money. We're giving them a piece of paper like, here's $400,000 for your house. And then with an adjustable rate mortgage, we know you can't even afford the principal as it is. And even if you could, the rate gets adjusted. So now, even if you can't afford it, if you're one of the fortunate people that can't afford it, good on you. But it could be that now you're paying, now you're paying for a house that has nowhere near the worth of what you're paying. So even if you could afford it, you're like, I'm basically paying for a $700,000 house right now that's worth $300,000. And so everyone just like walks away from the house. Everyone says like, oh, that must be a travesty for the bank. It's like, no, because all the bank did is go, here's your piece of paper with $400,000. You walked out of the house. What's the tangible asset? It's the house. The bank got the house. Like, it was a perfect Ponzi scheme, basically.
Not only did they get the house, they also got $700 billion in bailouts.
Yes, then they get the bailouts. I mean, Obama held their feet to the fire. Which they said, like, no, how about a bailout instead?
It's the most ridiculous system when you think about it, that all these banks are they're printing money, and then they're making, quote, risky loans, but it's not risky because they just printed the money out of thin air.
There's no money.
Right? I mean, they didn't print it. The Federal Reserve printed it, but they gave it to them for free, basically. And
the money's got to be somewhere. Like, well, no. And then you start looking into fractional reserve banking, and
the money.
No one has any money. There's no money.
It's in a computer,
right?
It says X amount of dollars. It just says it there, and that's where it is. So then, on top of that, they get bailed out, and they know they're going to get bailed out. They know that they're going to be too big to fail. And when Obama tried to hold their feet to the fire, they were like, no.
Yeah.
I don't think so, buddy.
Hey, guy that was put in office, buy it.
Fork it over.
By us, by the way. So the way that it was explained, that real estate model, he goes, well, that's exactly what the World Bank model is and the IMF. Mm-hmm. And so when we go into these countries, and a book that really perfectly explains this is Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which came out in the early 90s.
Yeah,
I think
it's old
quite
now.
a while. Yeah, it's on its third edition right now. But it's the exact same kind of model because the U.S. would broker the loan through the World Bank because we run the World Bank more or less, and the IMF.
The IMF is like the European version of the World Bank. Is that how it works?
I think something like that.
Kind of,
Yeah,
the World Bank's more of a U.S. thing, but they do the
there's-
same thing.
There's so much overlap from them too.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They essentially do the same thing, though.
Right.
Right. Make these loans to poor countries.
So the way that this model works, for those of you that aren't weird nerds like we are, is the U.S. would go to a country, say in South America, and say, we're going to loan you guys, whatever, $20 billion.
Hold on, you're skipping the step where they overthrow the leader of that country.
That's coming.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. First is the pitch. And so they go, like, we're going to loan you guys. Wouldn't you guys love a hydroelectric plant or a dam or update your electrical infrastructure?
Mm-hmm.
And so for the people not in the know, I mean, we've been doing this for over a century at this point, and they go like, yeah, that would be great if they were completely oblivious to what this model was. So we go, okay, good. You're using our contractors, which are politically connected and political elites. So we are going to provide that infrastructure. So there's fuckery number one. And then the John Perkins from Economic Hitman, he actually describes it. He goes, you got to think about this is what's known in his circles as the death economy. Have you ever heard that term?
Mm-mm.
So the death economy is basically an economic model based solely on just wildly short-term profits with no regard for whatever destruction or the system falling apart on the road. Like,
right.
You're not concerned. It's basically just,
like you run the business. Like you take a respected car company like Ford,
right,
and you just start pumping out like the worst cars ever based on the good name of Ford.
Right.
Drive it totally into the ground and then turn the thing over for scrap at the end of the day.
Or if you want to make a more accurate kind of metaphor towards the World Bank and the IMF model, and what the U.S. would broker these deals with, a lot, mostly in South America at this point, it would be buying the Ford Motor Company, selling off all the machinery and factories, and like, look, we made $400 million in profit this year. I no longer have a business. Like, this is our last year operation.
Yeah,
like that's kind of more close to what
right.
The way that we broker these loans. So you go into these countries and say, we're going to build this plant. We're going to build this plant, and we're going to loan you the money to pay us to build this plant. And it has these very short-term benefits right off the bat, because what it does is it only benefits the more political elites in that country. Let's say we went into Ecuador, for example. We're going to make you a hydroelectric plant, and we're going to give you $20 billion. We're going to use our private contractors, which I'm sure the price is wildly, inflated, and then probably goes down from levels from there. I'm sure, like, that night at dinner, Nancy Pelosi leans over to Paul and goes like, now's a good time to buy Halliburton, if you know what I mean, assuming he's not in the middle of a violent gay love affair with a hammer-wielding maniac.
A tryst?
Okay, but a tryst, yeah. It's not, but that's not what we're talking about. And what happens is the loan is structured in such a manner that it's impossible to pay back for that country, right? We don't want the money, because what we want is to come to you and go like, okay, so they're going to try to pay back that loan within in the first couple of years, they try to start paying that back. It's impossible. They're impossible terms, just like the adjustable rate mortgages. It's the exact same model. And what happens is the population of that country are the ones that immediately get fucked, because the first place that they draw money from their economy is going to be like social services and schools and such. Like, we got to pay the big dog here. There's like the biggest military in the world is saying like, where's our fucking money? And so they start pulling money from places that immediately affect the population. This is the beginning stages of the death economy. Mm-hmm. And then obviously, because the loan is structured in such a way, it's impossible to pay back. And so we go to Ecuador, this hypothetical example. I have actual examples here too. We go like, we notice you're having a little trouble paying the loan back. And they're like, yeah, we can't come up with this much money. And I'm like, well, how about this? Why don't we privatize your timber industry, for example? Or we notice you're sitting on all this oil, for example, or you guys sure have a lot of copper there, or cobalt, or lithium, and we get access to their natural resources. And we bring in another wave of private contractors that can now take whatever resources as a way to leverage the payments for the loan. And added bonus, we don't have these pesky like environmental regulations that we have in the U.S. with all these like bloody hippies like yelling at us about drilling into the ground. And they just, if you are at all an environmentalist and care about the planet, like this is something that is ruining the planet.
Right.
Of like private contractors coming in from the U.S. to leverage these loans and just stripping the earth bare. And that is what the death economy is. It's like, well, don't they have a vested interest in not like ruining the river and the fucking groundwater and stripping, generations of whatever natural resource they have? Like, no, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck because it's not their country.
Right.
They're going to move on to the next country after that.
And the people buy into it at first because they're promised, higher paying jobs.
Right.
And things. But a lot of times what happens is and this is how it kind of ties into what Rishi Sunak was saying, they come in and they offer to build infrastructure that the country doesn't really need. But a business that's going into, like, let's say take the cobalt out of the ground, or oil out of the ground.
Yep.
They need it. So they build a railroad that goes to these like industry-specific areas in the country. Doesn't really help the people, but it does help these industries, right? So the people end up with no improvement in their life. They give up doing what they were doing, which wasn't making them rich, but it was enough to sustain who they were. Let's say like a farmer,
right,
who was a subsistence farmer.
This is
now he's farming rice,
right,
only, and he's exporting rice, and now he's getting paid for exporting rice. He can't sustain his own life anymore because all he's growing is this one monocrop.
Right.
And monocrop,
which in turn ruins the soil.
Exactly.
Ruins his natural environment. So even if you wanted to go back to subsistence farming and, supporting like basically a smaller local scale, he couldn't.
What a good analogy too for why world government is such a bad idea.
Right.
It's the monocrop of ideas.
Not bad, dude.
You know what I mean?
It is.
It's like, no, you instead of having all of these different types of government and self-rule here and autonomy there and all these different kind of experiments happening, no, you just have one government ruling over everything. It's the same thing as the disaster that you can create from a monocrop.
I just, not to do too far down the rabbit hole, but I want to make a quick callback, because what you're talking about is when they bring in the private contractors, they are going to create the infrastructure for this trading that whatever said country, usually the U.S., almost always the U.S., as they were trying to create a global hegemony for over a decade now. Now we actually have some competition with China, which we can get into later. But when they bring in the private contractors to build that infrastructure with all the railways and the shipping magnets, this is what we hit on one of our first episodes, that we connected Tom Cochran, who wrote Life as a Highway, and he happened to be in Africa at this same time, which coincidentally inspired him to write Life as a Highway, while also, he worked for a record label, which was connected to the shipping magnate companies that ran this entire, corrupt system. So,
glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I don't want that to fall between the cracks.
No, we can't let that happen.
No.
So anyways, that's kind of, the IMF and the World Bank. When you hear a global leader talking about providing funding to these poor countries so that they can become net zero, it's like, they don't want that.
No.
You're forcing that on them. You're going to ruin their economy, impoverish them, and make them beholden to your stupid net zero program.
So you bring up a good point with if a country. So here's where.
Look at Sri Lanka. They bought into it, and look what happened to them.
Yeah. And there's also people already suggesting that Sri Lanka, they're going to need another loan from the IMF or the World Bank to get out of this problem. I'm like, that's how they got there. That's how they got there.
And every time a country has told the IMF to fuck off, they have coincidentally.
Glad you brought that up, because so if people say it's okay, if we have this track record of people that deal with the World Bank or the IMF, and it just ends up devastating a country, so people say well, what? After a while, on the third or fourth country, when they go we're not interested, right? So if you think about what were the leaders of that country why would they accept these loans? Well, it's one of two things. Is it number one? So just keep in mind, empathy deficient, complete morally bankrupt psychopaths is not a U.S. thing. They're in every country all over the place. So
not just a U.S. thing.
Yeah, not just the U.S.
Yeah.
So possibly the leader of that country, which might explain how he got to power, is one of those people. because these loans wildly benefit the leadership that takes on the loan, and the politically connected, just like they do in the U.S., right? And so let's say he's like, I know this will ruin the country, and I don't care. It's going to benefit, my small like political elite, this echelon of political elites. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
And it's just going to create such a wild division of wealth, but it doesn't matter because I'm in this top strata. Number two, you get the occasional leader that says like, no, not interested. This will actually just devastate my country. And I see that, I've looked at Ecuador and Uruguay and Brazil and the things that you guys have done there, and we're not going to end up like that. Well, this is what's behind number two, and this is what that book, John Perkins' Confession of an Economic Hitman, is about. And he knows this because he was one, and he saw the stuff in person, and he actually took part in this model. That's what they refer to in these circles as this is when the jackals come in.
Right.
And these are private contractors hired through the CIA. They go in there and they do anything from...
They bring democracy.
They drop some fucking democracy on your ass. Democratic Republic of Congo, who happens to be sitting on 75% of the world's cobalt, which is an essential mineral for electric vehicles. Get ready for some democracy, bud.
Yeah. I don't know if they're already doing it.
They're already doing it.
Although it's China that I think that's raping
so
them the most.
For the first time in world history, the U.S. was the one, probably the only like substantial purveyor of this wonderful death economy. And for the first time in world history, we have competition, and that's with China, although they're doing like a slightly different model of it. So a perfect example is there was a president, his name is, it was Ecuador, and he was president in the 90s for 10 years, which is one of the longest running, presidents in that area, which we can get into lately with their airline safety statistics. We'll call that. And he said the Ecuador had already accepted a loan through the World Bank in the late 70s and early 80s, I think. And they had been behind on the payments. And this guy came and he ran on a platform of labor reform and workers' rights. He was a far left guy and he won in a runoff election. And he goes, we're not paying this. Like, Ecuador does not owe this money. The banks do. The corrupt politicians and the banks made this deal. And we are going to completely default on their payments, right? We're not paying you guys anymore. Mm-hmm. And then right at the last second, China came in and said, like, hey, before everything gets off the rails, we'll pay the loan back and we'll pay it, and you guys can pay us. And they structured the loan that was, unlike how the U.S. would do it, they structured the loan in such a manner that it could be paid back. And so as China is one of like player number two of this kind of global hegemony that they're trying to pull off, of like basically global domination. China is known for its more like long-term strategy and thinking. They don't do this death economy. It's like, no, we don't think it's a sustainable model to go in there and completely ruin a country, get the population in a revolution and starvation and devoid of, pollution everywhere and no drinking water and no more natural resources. We got to play the long game. It's like, we got to get in there, establish these relationships and like slowly basically build our world empire that way. So they stepped in with Ecuador, bought the loan, structured the payments that would be easier to pay back. And in turn, the U.S. is like, well, we got our money, so I guess that's fine. And so what's China trying to export right now? And that's what we talk about with the social credit system, which is central banking digital currency that we talk about, the surveillance state, facial recognition software, all this stuff. The World Economic Forum talks about this all stuff. It's already being done in China, and it's terrifying. It's in my mind, it's the end of humanity. If that happens, like freedom is out the window. Do you want to take a wild guess what country was the first one outside of China to adopt this social credit score system?
Is it? No, I'm not going to guess. I don't want to sound stupid.
Ecuador.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's right there for me.
We did this before the podcast.
We've rehearsed this 3 times.
So when they talk about that, these countries that want to refuse, that they're like, they say they stand up, they're a far leftist, they get elected in this landslide and say like, no, I'm not letting you devastate my country. And then we have examples of this. So we have people like Jaime Roldos he was the first guy from Ecuador. He ran also a far left campaign. He groomed that other guy that stood up to the World Bank in the 90s, but this guy was in 81. And he just said, like, no, I'm severing ties with all these U.S.-backed infrastructure projects that are like ruining our country. Dies in a plane crash, 1981. 3 weeks later, Torrijos in Panama, same thing. He goes, yeah, I'm seeing what's going on here. You're ruining every country. He goes, yeah, I'm not going to have it. 3 weeks after the first guy died, he dies in another plane crash. So the CIA loves plane crashes.
Don't they?
They really, really do. So that's why I'm sure when...
Are you about to jump to 9/11?
No.
Okay. Good.
Glad you brought that up. So yeah, it's the point being that even if someone is able to recognize, and they do recognize that, these establishments, these deals, that Rishi Sunak is bringing up, like, we're going to allocate, whatever, $500 billion.
Well, they act like they're doing some sort of charity by just giving this money to these countries so that they can get rid of oil and go to solar and wind. And they're loaning them the money at rates they can't pay back in order for them to get rid of the one thing that has made them successful over the last century.
Yeah.
Get rid of that and then take this loan to get it that you can't pay back.
And if you don't, you end up like Allende in Chile, Mabamba in Congo,
or you end up like
Iraq, or Zien in Vietnam. These are all people, and
you jump out of the frying pan.
Admitted to, like,
you jump out of that frying pan and you land in China's fire with social credit score.
Yeah,
right.
Yep.
Those are your options.
Yep.
I mean, it's pretty bad when our system of, I don't know what you call this, foreign investment is
putting it mildly,
it's completely outdone by China.
Yeah,
it's outdone is not the right word, but China makes it look like it's evil.
Yeah,
when a communist dictatorship like China has the softer approach, you got to really look in the mirror and see what you're doing. So.
Yeah.
All right, anyways, I'm going to get back to Rishi here. I'm sure there's plenty more to say on the World Bank stuff, but so he was outlining the 3 actions in order to get to this net zero world that we all so desperately want.
But public investment alone isn't enough. Our second action is to mobilize private finance.
Read fascism.
Let me pay an enormous tribute to Mark Carney for his leadership that is delivering results. The Glasgow Financial Alliance for Net Zero has now brought together financial organizations with assets worth over $130 trillion of capital to be deployed.
You got to ask, why do you think these private firms would want to be involved in this? Is it because they just have so much money they need to do something good with it? They're just trying to give it away? Or could it be that it's profitable for them to be invested in this stuff, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
And why would Rishi Sunak and these world governments want to use private money when they can just print money or raise taxes or do this stuff themselves? It's because they want to have... There's things that private companies can do that governments can't.
Right.
Especially in places with strong laws.
Yeah.
But what he's describing is fascism.
Yeah.
It's a public-private partnership, which anytime you hear that, you should just hear fascism.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about the 7 dudes in the room.
NPR, fascists. PBS, fascist.
Exactly.
Don't get me started
This
on the DMV.
is a historic wall of capital for the net zero transition around the world. What matters now is action, to invest that capital in our low-carbon future. To do that, investors need to have as much clarity and confidence in the climate impact of their investments as they do in the traditional financial metrics of profit and loss.
Profit and loss. That would be the free market.
Mm-hmm.
I think what he's talking about is profit and profit.
Profit and your loss.
Because there is no loss. They're not going to lose anything. There's no risk. Anyone that invests in this is going to be backed by the full faith and security of the U.S. government and the World Bank and the IMF. And they need to believe in, what he's saying is they need to believe in this system as much as they believe in the free market. It's not the free market. Yeah. It's this fascist system that we're talking about. So, yeah, and I don't think it's a tough sell. They're fully guaranteeing any money that's going into this.
So our third action is to rewire the entire global financial system for net zero. Better and more consistent climate data, sovereign green bonds, mandatory sustainability disclosures, proper climate risk surveillance, stronger global reporting standards. All things we need to deliver, and I'm proud that the UK is playing its part. We've already made it mandatory for businesses to disclose climate-related financial information, with 35 other countries signing up to do the same. Today, I'm announcing that the UK will go further and become the first ever net zero aligned financial centre. This means we are going to move towards making it mandatory for firms to publish a clear, deliverable plan setting out how they will decarbonise and transition to net zero with an independent task force to define what's required. So,
ESG.
A renewed pledge to $100 billion a year of public funding, over $130 trillion of private capital waiting to be deployed, and a greener financial system underway. We're talking about making a tangible difference to people's lives, about cheap, reliable and clean electricity to power schools and hospitals in rural Africa.
Doesn't happen.
About better coastal defences in the Philippines and the Pacific Islands to protect people from storm surges. About everyone, everywhere, having fresher water to drink, cleaner air to breathe, better insulated homes in which to live.
Fewer puppies dying. Grandma living forever.
Dogs and cats not living together.
It's such a pipe dream, all this stuff. Clean, reliable energy.
Right.
Renewable energy. Like, that's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
It's not reliable.
Yep.
That's the problem with it.
They give you California.
Yeah. Less bullying in schools. It's like everything great is going to happen if you just get behind this one world government, this ESG and central bank digital currency. That
this guy is the British version of Justin Trudeau. It's the exact same thing. It's just the narratives have slightly different titles, but it is exactly the same. Do you think? This is something I always think about this because I'm always interested in the psychology of people. Do you think that he knows he's evil? Or do you think?
No.
Actually, let me rephrase that. Do you think that he thinks he's doing a noble thing?
Yes, I do.
I don't.
I think he does think that this is noble because he thinks that he is a central, like the perfect central planner. He thinks that if the power, and frankly, I think that too. About myself, that give me all the power in the world and I would make the world into a much better place than it is now. And I think that he thinks the same thing.
Okay, so that's a little different. And that's because that's kind of what I think. That's what I think about him, a Justin Trudeau, a Gavin Newsom, and an Anthony Fauci. It's like, you guys just let us do this. Like, we know you don't know what we know. We know better than you. And I even know that it's going to suck for you. This is not a system that's going to work. But in the greater good, which just anytime you hear that, say no. Not interested. Not interested. Yeah. Is in the it's better for the greater good. So this is what he's saying is exactly the same thing as when you hear like an Anthony Fauci saying like, what, you manipulated the data or you're wrong, you're lying. Like, he's like, well, I had to because I couldn't give you guys the actual information because then you wouldn't go get the vaccine, for example.
Yeah.
Like, I'd lied to you for your benefit. It's just like,
yes,
that is such a glaring symptom of a political elite. Like, well, you guys are fucking idiots. You're just like a bunch of like welders and grocery store clerks. Like, you can't be making your own decisions. if elections had that much consequences, they wouldn't be left up to the public.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that type of person is incapable of looking at history and seeing how this was tried before and never succeeded. It always fails. It's they think that they are the smartest person in the room, even though they, by all measures, are not. Like, most of the things that they tell us are wrong. So they're either lying or dumb.
Yeah.
And that's who's drawn to this line of work of enforcing their will on everyone else around them. It's really sick. It's just like Bill Gates is that kind of person.
Yeah.
Right? He just
He's
thinks...
he's the epitome of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, his ideas about blocking the sun.
Yeah.
To prevent climate change.
He takes it to another level.
Like,
he has I think he adds in a very entertaining and enjoyable to watch God complex that he has. Like, he actually thinks, like, I need to control the weather. Basically, and the population, and getting the population. Like, he has some...
Yeah.
He's a broken individual. Like, he is one of the most morally bankrupt, empathy deficient people I've ever...
I mean, imagine thinking that you know for a fact that you're right, that the world's population is too great and it needs to be shrunk, or climate change is such a crisis that you need to step in and remove people's ability to feed themselves,
or
clothe themselves,
or remove them altogether,
or just remove them.
Yeah,
exactly. I mean, it kind of reminds me of like the spraying. Do you know that they seed clouds in 8 states in America to try to make it rain?
I do.
There is no evidence that it works.
No.
Yet they spray shit into the air to try to make clouds.
Oh, like what? Chemtrails? Sounds like chemtrails.
It is.
Is it turning the frogs gay? Is that what's going on?
Apparently, it's not doing anything. It's I think it's called silver nitrate, and it's totally harmless by all accounts.
Right.
We think. But still, what gives... Like, I can't just go start spraying shit into the air off my roof, even if it's not harmless. I mean, my neighbors would complain. Eventually, someone would come and tell me to stop.
You know what you could do?
What?
I don't want to get off topic here.
I have a feeling you do.
But we agree to stop drinking in July.
Yes.
But I just drink all the time behind your back.
Okay.
And you suffer through the entire month. And at the end, I'm like, dude, I've been having this great time. You lied, you lie. Huh?
Been working on that since we started the podcast.
What have you been talking about this whole time? Okay. Cloud seeding.
Yeah. So I just don't. I don't get it. It's like these kinds of people somehow just end up with the power. No one actually wants him to do these things that he's talking about. The countries that he's bringing it to don't want it.
Right.
It's just a few elites that want it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like when the IMF sponsors the CIA to overthrow a democratically elected leader in a country so they can install someone that's going to be more amenable to their...
That didn't happen in Chile and Ecuador and Panama and the Congo and Cameroon and Liberia. Come on, dude.
You're putting into power this one dude. Why does this one guy, this one warlord, all of a sudden get to dictate what's happening to Chile or to Cameroon?
Because you know what? The question you asked is actually, the more I read into this, if you think about it, is so when you go to the leader of whatever, Uruguay, and say like, how would you like to, or loan you money for a dam or whatever? And you're like, no, I don't really like that. The terms of this loan are not sustainable or wherever it is, and everything that we went through before. But you got to think about what's the decision that you have as that leader. Let's say that you're not a complete psychopath, and let's say you actually care about your country. Is if you look at the track record of the U.S. in Latin America and Africa, even up to today, and now like China's entered it, and China's like heavy in Africa right now. That's where they're putting all their money.
Mm-hmm.
Or their loans. And China doesn't do it through the World Bank or the IMF. They have their own bank. I think it's called the AAIA, which is like their own kind of world bank. So they're, like I said, they're kind of playing this long game. But to go back to when you talk about the leader of this country, like, what's really your choice? Like, let's look at the history of what the U.S. has done over the last century in these countries. It's like, we can make you wildly wealthy, you and you're politically connected, you're 1%, right? And it's going to devastate your country. Or we're going to kill you. Like, you're getting on a plane and you're fucking not coming off that plane.
Right.
Or, we will, it could be, they mix it up a lot. I mean, like I said, the CIA loves planes. If you look at the amount of people and of Latin American leaders that died in plane crashes, it's fucking almost ominous or hilarious. Sorry. And, but, they could go like, well, what we'll do is we can organize and facilitate a political coup to get you thrown out of office, and maybe you get beat to death in the streets, or you have to flee your country, much like we did in Ukraine in 2014. That no one seems to like to talk about. And we will get a leader in there that's sympathetic to our interests, that will take that loan, because it's basically, you don't have a choice. It's silver or lead kind of deal from the old school,
right?
So.
Yeah.
I was looking at people that mysteriously died in plane crashes, and I found my personal favorite. It was a former U.S. Secretary of Commerce under the Clinton administration. He was killed in a plane crash in Croatia in 1996. I was like, he's on that list of like people that were potentially politically assassinated. But I'm like, there was also 34 other people on that flight. And you go like, that's a heavy roll of the dice. Like, we need this guy dead, but there's 34 other people on that flight, like all the staff members and maybe even some like random people. And you just think like, it could be just a coincidence. I mean, I know planes crash, but they happened to go through the wreckage. He had a bullet hole in the back of his head.
No way.
Yes. Yeah.
How does that work?
Ron Brown. How that works is, I don't know what he knew or did, but
the logistics of the plane crash, of killing him and then the plane crash.
Well, they had someone shoot him on the plane, and then they killed the guy. They wiped out everyone, like they covered their tracks. So what I thought, like,
so did the guy that pulled the trigger also die in the plane crash?
Right, correct.
So he was just like
I'm
taking one for the team. I'm
going to hire you to kill someone on a plane, but I need to cover my tracks for hiring you. So.
Why not just crash the plane?
Well, fair question. Is I thought, did some digging. I'm like, oh, you served for the Clinton administration. And I got like, I don't know what this dude knew, but old Hillary was crossing all our T's and dotting her I's on this one.
All right. Belt and suspenders approach.
Yes, exactly.
I was thinking about this, the climate stuff from watching this Rishi Sunak video, and it just struck me. It's like, all you have to say is it's for the climate, and everyone just is like, oh, yes, we must do everything we can, whatever the cost, because it's just such a crisis. And it made me...
It's the same model as the COVID.
Yes.
It's you get people that are solely fixated on the emotional pleas, and all the arguments for it are emotional. And that's how I don't know, it's just an easy way to get people on board, Just start calling people a grandma killer, because they want to go to work. The same thing with the climate. Just tell them they're ruining the earth by, your neighbor's still using a gas leaf blower. Like, tell him he's killing the earth.
Yeah. It's a cult.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah. It has, we've talked about this before, it has all of the components of a cult, right? It has, like, irrationality. It has it's a complete deconstruction of objective truth.
Yeah.
Right. When you go to people like, you guys as Lord and Savior Al Gore are saying like Miami and New Orleans are supposed to be underwater by 2020. Like, it didn't really happen. And you're just like, no, like we moved on to this other thing. You guys have false idols. You have Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And like this autistic Swedish chick, like she's kind of, we hold her up on this pedestal, and whatever comes out of just that insane yap of her mouth, like we hold that as the Bible and repeat it and make bumper stickers out of it. It has all of the components of a religious cult.
Yeah. Check this out. November 18th, 1978, Jonestown, Guyana. 909 members of People's Temple died in what has been called the largest mass suicide in modern history.
Nobody joins a cult. Nobody joins something they think is going to hurt them. You join a religious organization, you join a political movement, and you join with people that you really like.
think the early 60s had been a time of great optimism. The message of People's Temple was, no, the dream is alive.
Oh no, who's going to decide who and when a person's going to die? We must never allow that, because this is the kind of thing that ushers in the terror of a Hitler's Germany.
What I saw recreation as being was building a city where we could move and raise our children outside of the oppression and the racism of the United States of America.
He said, this punch is going to be passed out to everybody here, and we will all die right here in the church together as one.
We were just slaughtered. They were slaughtered.
We did not want this kind of ending. We wanted to live, to shine, to bring light to a world that is dying for a little bit of love.
A fascinating story, man.
It's the same thing. Yeah. These people who are falling hook, line, and sinker for the climate cult, they want to save the world. They're good-hearted people that feel like they're doing the right thing, but they're being indoctrinated into something where they're asked to give up their rationality. They're asked not to think critically. In a lot of cases, they're asked not to associate with the people that they used to associate with, which is classic cult behavior. And it's not that much of a stretch to call it a death cult.
Right.
Because for people that are in, especially in poor countries, who are being asked to stop using, and Sri Lanka comes to mind again, who are being asked to stop using petroleum and to switch to a very unreliable, unpredictable form of energy, and to give up their petroleum-based fertilizers and all the good things that come from the things that are allegedly contributing to the destruction of the planet, they're going to suffer from that, if not die, if not starve to death.
Yeah.
It's fucking...
That's how a cult works.
Not too far off from that.
Yeah, another thing popped in my mind is the notion of blasphemy, which I have experienced. When you just ask questions. I had a nasty exchange with someone once. I said, I'm just asking the question here, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about this before on the podcast. So I was taught in school that there's going to be an ice age, there's going to be famine, there's going to be overpopulation, and when it was we'd have to live underground, there'd be no more clean water. Not all at once, but all in various this kind of gradient intervals throughout my life. You're just taught about what the next panic's going to be. The latest one was global warming, the ice caps melting, the Greenland disappearing into the sea, various U.S. cities being underwater, and Ali just said, "Mo, I'm open to whatever idea. I want to hear all the ideas, right? I'm not decided on anything. I don't, you know what I mean? I'd like to take in as much information as I can, and try to kind of decipher it from there. And I'm just like, are you at all concerned, or does it stand out to you as at least being somewhat interesting that all these predictions were 100% wrong?" So it's like, oh my, this is the question I have, and you can apply the same model to the COVID stuff. It's like, why would I listen to you now though? Why is it that you feel that you guys nailed it this time? And I got actually screamed at, yelled at, where I had to de-escalate. Okay, settle down. I was like, you're acting like a religious, I'm a heretic. You're this is weird. I committed blasphemy.
Yeah.
And that situation, which happened a couple years ago, made me think. I started reframing the whole idea of the climate panic within the terms of a religious cult. And we've had several conversations about that since then.
Yeah. You're one of the first people I've heard say that, and I've heard a lot of smart people say it since then.
Yeah.
for the poor.